Firstly, a carbon tax would help to boost the government budget, making room for funding for research on clean energy sources, cancer research, you name it. But how much revenue might a carbon tax actually raise? Well, most experts suggest a tax of around $25 per ton of CO2, which would raise approximately $125 billion annually, roughly 1.66667% of the current US government budget. Secondly, though some might argue that there would be a significant economic impact, my research from the elleberryimf.org, and I quote, "A carbon tax, taken by itself, might likely impose a small but significant long-term drag on the economy. Using the carbon tax revenue in ways that promote long-term economic growth would offset most of that negative impact." Thirdly, I'd like to point out that most of the emissions currently being produced come from developed countries like the USA, China, and the EU, while countries like these have little to do with this, mainly in developing countries like Africa and other places are getting the worst of climate change. A carbon tax would help to make sure the developing countries aren't the only ones having to deal with climate change, which is caused by the already developed countries mostly. Furthermore, climate change is a serious threat, and this is a chance to bring us all together and to get over our habit of wars and grudges. Call me an optimist. However, we still have other bigger issues other than just war. We are already slowly transitioning to smaller resource-based wars and civil wars. And if we can work together to solve all the resource problems, among others, war will be history and in the textbooks. After all, who wants to fight if we can simply make the resources plentiful? Finally, there is the fact that a tax on emissions could help to encourage companies to be more eco-friendly and pollute less. This is because, unlike simply taxing the products themselves, in response, companies would just raise the prices. A carbon tax itself, taxing the carbon, might potentially cause the companies to rethink their decision and maybe be more eco-friendly, which would benefit all of us. For the reasons above, this is why I believe that a carbon tax will have a lot of benefits. Thank you. I am done.
For sure. Super strong speech, Henry, and really great job on your time as well. Go for it.
Okay, so even though the negative have pointed out that they think climate change is going to be helped by a carbon tax, however, this is a very flexible system, and I firmly believe that climate change has a bigger impact, both in terms of impact and urgency, than the smaller issues that you have talked about. For example, simply having a small effect on businesses does not compare to the megalomaniacal effect that climate change is currently having. Currently, 45,000 people die from natural disasters every year, which adds up to about 123 people dying because of it every day. Climate change is serious, and we need to act. If we don't, the poorer regions such as Africa and among others will suffer simply because us richer countries can't make up our minds and are arguing about what to do. This is the time for us to be active and not worry about the small economic or small potential impacts that carbon tax could have. Instead, other policies and bills could potentially be introduced to help make this system better. Again, as I have already mentioned, the negative has the burden of proof to prove that carbon tax, even a little, is bad. And I do not see how businesses losing a little money can compare to climate change. And I don't see how carbon tax is something that should be scrapped immediately either. Therefore, I believe that we shall win this debate. Thank you.
For sure. Strong speech as well, Henry. All right. I think ultimately, though, I ended up voting for the affirmative, so for Henry and Wen. And I think so. It was it was a really, really close debate, though. It was by a slim margin. I think that the negative did a really great job telling me, hey, carbon taxes can be bad because they can hurt low-income economies. It raises the prices of gas, so people who already don't have a lot of money are suffering too. I think that originally I was leaning more towards negative, but I think that Henry did a really great job, especially of saying, hey, maybe climate change can be worse, right? The effects are stronger, or people being injured in natural disasters or even extinction is something that we face. So I think at the end of this debate, I am left with the question of what is worse, like everyday suffering, which is more like are people more harmed by not being able to get access to food and water, or like gas for their car, or is something like climate change that has really large effects on possibly extinction? Which one is worse?